Right. Welcome to the Business of Allied Health podcast. So I've got a very special guest, Mick Hughes. I've known him for a while when he first was a co-founder at Learn.Physio, grabbing the platform for free, I think, off Ben Strachan. And I was like, why is he giving it away for free?
No, it's one of probably the leading my fate stories I've ever. I've had a few in my life, and that was probably the lucky ones that fall on my feet. But yeah,
Yeah. I don't think he has shares in the company, but yeah, so I recently caught up with Mick at one of his events to speak about APL in Melbourne. So it was an awesome face-to-face event via Learn.Physio. Yeah, welcome, Nick. So just to start with, I'd love you, I know you often post stuff about ACL and etc. Let's talk about
yep,
your story. I mean, it's quite compelling because I think there's a few things here. I mean, you're one of the original influencers, right? in our profession early on, and got a lot of engagement, over 120,000 followers on Instagram, also strong on LinkedIn. So yeah, talk about your story and where you started and where you are now.
yep, yeah. No, and thanks as always for the invitation, Barry. It's always nice to talk shop, and yeah, great to catch up recently. I think I don't know, from social media perspective, when we moved to Melbourne in 2016, my wife and I found myself in a place where I didn't do my training in Melbourne. I didn't have any contacts necessarily, didn't know people necessarily in Melbourne. And I'd sort of found myself in a clinic where I just saw an opportunity the way I wanted to promote my skill set first and foremost. And I wanted to see people in the clinic that I truly wanted to see. It was all kind of like at the forefront of the boom of information sharing. Like I'd been on Twitter for a while and I'd sort of seen the possibilities of that. LinkedIn had really started in 2016 to change from a very static, platform where you just put your CV and just put, what you've done over the course of your career on a very static page. It now sort of turned into almost like a Facebook feed as to what it is now. And so I sort of looked at those kind of things and saw an opportunity there. Obviously, when you're first in practice, when you start at a new clinic, you often find yourself floundering around with a lot of downtime. And then coincidentally at that time as well, I had grad cert in sports physio, which is a stepping stone to the masters of sports physio. So I'd sort of found myself, I'd started a subject at my masters with La Trobe Uni. So I found myself kind of like in this really nice place where I had a bit of downtime in the clinic. I had access to great educational resources and a full text library at La Trobe. And I kind of just also wanted to really sort of, probably throw out to an audience that hadn't sort of met me yet through clinical practices or physio placements that, hey, this is my skill set. This is what I like to see. This is the kind of free information that I'm sharing. I kind of actually was reading a blog post about Jamie Oliver of all people on a tram ride into Melbourne one day, and he was kind of like the first chef of his kind to really freely share his recipes online with the kind of self-fulfilling virtue of shares and shows his audience and the wider audience a recipe. They're more likely to come back to him to buy the cookbook, watch his TV show, do this, do that. So I thought, well, there's kind of like some little elements there that I'd like, I could see myself sort of do. So I thought, well, I'm just going to write some blogs, share them online, showcase, my areas of interest and my expertise, but also to help people, physios, help sports doctors, help orthopedic surgeons with this information. And look, if people still run into problems with their patients, then I'll be able to help them. So that's kind of like at the birthplace, I guess, of my social media journey. And it kind of, evolved over the last 10 years where I'd only just clocked up 10 years just only last week of being on Instagram of all places. So it's been fun. I've seen a lot change in the last particularly 5 or 6 years, but the first 5 or 6 years were a really, really strong and enjoyable ride.
Nice. I'm going to go back a bit further to childhood. Did you want to be famous or did you want to be an entertainer? Did you have any performing arts training? Do you have any mentors or inspiration, or you just jumped on and had that confidence and I can call it
Yeah.
knack, but like not every physio wants to be in front of the camera.
No, no, and I honestly, in a way, I just never really thought I want to be this. I don't want to be an influencer. I don't want to get paid to do this or paid to do that, and it's not about me. And all honesty, like I really, I for a long time, I was really fearful of being on stage and public speaking, and even though put myself in that position many, many times over. Yeah, I just really had this fear of, yeah, the spotlight, and that imposter syndrome really sort of was front in my mind for a very long time. But yeah, look, I was school captain of primary school and high school, so I had to sort of be on stage and make talks, but I was never the performer, never the singer, the dancer. My son is, of all people. He's 8 years old now, on his way to 9. He's, happily gets on stage, sings and dances and does that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, it wasn't part of my, I guess, DNA, but it's something that I've probably learned to embrace a little bit, and definitely become more comfortable with time. Yeah, and I just sort of come at it. Look, I'm here to help people, here to sort of, share information, not necessarily entertain.
Yeah, that's interesting that you said you're a school captain. So there's some kind of leadership potential in you, or you.
Yeah, I think that's probably where it is. I'm a school captain, but like sporting teams, I always sort of felt like a responsibility there to lead or to drive. Yeah, it's probably just that inherent trait of wanting to sort of help people, or sort of set a standard, or set an example of where I'd like, what I'd like to achieve within myself, but also to what I think us as a physio community and a sports medicine community could probably improve to help our patients. Yeah, it's funny when I've never really thought of it like that, but yeah, I've enjoyed the self-imposed responsibility, I guess is what it is.
Nice. And I guess back to that point, were your parents of that similar background? Did they nurture you in that way to become a leader, or was it sort of a.
No, they were very supportive, obviously, growing up. But no, my father, he was off the army, was sort of definitely ex-army, ex-military kind of thing, but not like he actually hated it. It's like part of that era where it was,
Yeah.
didn't want to borrow. But his birthday, unfortunately, got sort of pulled out of the lucky dip, and he had to go off to war. But it wasn't, certainly not part of his DNA. He's certainly a softer, kind of gentler man. My mum too, like, just humble, good people, but just never the CEOs, or
Mm.
the go-getters, just hardworking, humble people. So I definitely learned a lot from, that upbringing. But yeah, that's, I don't know where
This is, I love this type of stuff on my podcast. I might usually go backwards and I realize there's certain traits actually early on and patterns
Mm,
and where they end up as a physio now.
yeah,
Quite interesting.
yeah. No, there's definitely some cool backstories to people.
Yeah. So do you feel now that social media should be part of clinical credibility? So you could be an awesome, physio, doctor, or whatever.
Yeah.
If you don't market yourself or communicate that.
Yeah, I don't know if it's essential, but I think it's definitely got a strong role to play. And it's ever evolving, right? Like, I've even seen, like, just with Learn.Physio, how challenging it has sort of been with, changes to the algorithm. Everyone talks about the algorithm at the moment, and you sort of have to be a certain type of, I guess you have to do certain things on social media to be seen more, and to get your messages across to a different, wider audience, and not to be suppressed. And it certainly wasn't like that, 5 years ago, or nearly 10 years ago, when I first started, where, there's kind of almost like a sequential date by date, or, share by share kind of sort of process, where, you're kind of next in line and your thing got seen next. Whereas now you're seeing stuff from weeks and months ago, which is sort of still sort of circulating around. I think from a clinic point of view, it definitely has a role play. But I mean, I guess that's the kind of the nature of it, is that who is your intended audience, I guess, is always what you want to come back to. And if your audience is, kind of like, obviously, in this very discrete geographical area, if that's, kind of the market that you're appealing to, and that's what you want, obviously want people walking through the door, then it will certainly pay to have a presence online to, I guess, showcase what you and your staff can do. But I think nothing will also truly beat, the word of mouth and the GP referrals and the orthopedic surgeons who get that direct sort of, point A to point B kind of contact. So I think it's got a role to play. I think if you're now certainly a younger generation physio, and there's many, many more of them popping up, I've seen online, like the online physios and the online, practices, and that, the rise of telehealth, you'd absolutely need an online presence to, obviously, get your clientele logging on and doing a consult with you. So I guess it's probably depending on, your clinic owner of a practice with 10 physios versus a sole online physio who's really sort of getting people from all across the world to consult with, that you're going to have different ways to go about this. But and you would certainly weigh one way versus the other. I know within our clinic, we certainly have a social media presence, but it's more about sharing what we do with the community. I think that's probably where our social media from a admin point of view has landed, to try and really generate and build that community feel, as opposed to less about, here's Mick, he's a specialist in ACL injuries. There's probably not so much of that, but it's more about us being out in the community, covering sports events or going to fundraisers or trying to raise money for our local community too. But there's different opportunities online, whether or not you're a bricks and mortar practice or if you're an online practice too. But yeah, I agree. I think there should be some role to play.
Great answer. Should practice owners help their clinicians build their own personal brands online, even if it makes them more likely to leave in many fact, in
Yeah.
many occasions? So a lot
Yeah,
of, they like,
it's a lot of tension there. I see that. I could probably only speak to I had a really positive experience at my last practice in Melbourne. They were very supportive of me and my own kind of, I guess, interest to get an ACL heavy or a knee heavy clientele through the door, which is, a lot of that, Instagram, LinkedIn, education really merged into being very knee heavy, from the late, 2010s through to now. Early on, I was probably too scared to probably talk about ACL specifically for a long time. I didn't think I was the person to be that sort of leader in that field. There were way more people smarter and clever than me to do that. But I think something switched there, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to run with it and share it. And they were so supportive of me. They really got behind me, and it benefited them ultimately, because it made, by me sharing this information both, to a general audience within Melbourne, but also too, obviously sharing it online, and I was getting telehealth consults, all that kind of stuff as well. They were stoked. They were really supportive, because it ultimately made their business grow. Because even though I was kind of funneling most of the ACL and the reception were funneling most of the ACLs and knees to me, it kind of opened up, the walk-ins to all the other physios. It sort of allowed the other physios to see and specialize in subsets of, injuries as well, like necks, backs, shoulders, and that kind of stuff. So it was a win-win situation for our clinic. Now, that was a clinic where I was a subcontractor as well. So I think that's probably where it might get a little bit messy and murky when you're a paid employee. But even in saying that, I still think there's some elements of whether or not you're an employee or you're a subcontractor. I think even as an employee, you by I guess trying to create a brand as an employee when you work under a banner of an organization, I think the same rules still apply. To be honest, if the owner is worried that the person is going to kind of jump ship and leave, where are they going to leave to? They're probably just going to open up it's like a single physio clinic around the corner, or treat from their home or anything like that. I think there's a lot of unnecessary fear there.
mm,
They may end up leaving, but they'll probably, I don't think they're going to be necessarily a direct competitor to you, because the reality is, if like you leave a practice and you start your own thing, you've got no time to do the social media and be that kind of person, because you're too busy trying to run a practice. Like,
yeah,
you got to, that's what I've found over time
yeah,
too. It's just
yeah,
like, my interest and my ability to craft and create social media posts for this kind of current algorithm, it's lost on me. Like, I can't create a 30-minute kind of, moving parts picture with three moving cameras and make it really super creative, like a lot of excellent content creators. I don't have time for that. And nor will a person that's, leaving you to run their own sole
yeah.
practice. So I don't know. I think there's probably some unnecessary fear there. And I think it probably can work against them if there's too much resistance. I think it should be embraced. I think as long as it's not detracting ultimately from the ethos of the business and the culture of the business, and if it's not necessarily all about them and they're becoming bigger than the organization, I think that's probably where just some conversations need to be had early. But I think there's some great benefit to both parties if practice owners embrace that. I truly, truly believe that.
Oh, no, great insights there, Mick. And I think you've said something there, that buzzword contractor.
Yeah,
A lot of business coaches that are totally against it, about that
yeah,
model. But at my
yeah,
clinic, for example, we've been running for a while. We have both. Some
yeah.
people just suit the contractor model better. For example, they might be studying post-grad, they need more
Yeah.
flexibility. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And also gives them a bit more autonomy, right? Over creating their own brand within your business
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love that. I love that part of my career. Like I really, really thrived and enjoyed it. The first, I worked in two separate clinics over 6 years. One in Townsville as a new grad for 3 years, then moved to Newcastle. Had a clinic, worked in a clinic there for 3 years. Then moved into Melbourne for nearly seven, where it was pretty much in Melbourne. I think most practices are subcontractor, setup. And now moving back to Townsville, back into an employee role. I've probably found that transition a little bit tricky, having seen the benefits of
yeah,
working as a subcontractor and having a lot of flexibility. But in saying that too, my bosses, I now work under a healthier organisation who own multiple practices, dozens and dozens of practices around Australia and New Zealand. They're also too super supportive as well. So of like being an employee, but also to having like I guess an area of interest and a certainly a social media presence, that kind of stuff. It's never been frowned upon. It's always been really supportive. Once again, probably a great example of a business organisation embracing someone that's keen to get a clientele that really makes them satisfied. And I think that's a big word. Like as a clinician, I've grown super satisfied with my patient list. There was certainly a period when I first moved back to Townsville where I went from having a very ACL centric list in Melbourne to having probably a 1 or 2 year period there where I was back to seeing probably 50%, knees versus 50% backs, necks, and shoulders. And I became a little bit increasingly unsatisfied with my work. And then now it's started to swing back to the kind of probably 90% swing again, knees and ACLs versus 10% the other. So yeah, it's good. I think that there just needs to be some mutual respect there between both parties.
great. So yeah, so you published with Randall Cooper the Melbourne ACL Rehab Guide, which I bought
Yeah,
a long time ago. I think it was
yeah,
version
it's free,
1.0.
free now.
Maybe there's updates there that I've.
It's coming. Number three is coming.
So my question is, what are private practices still getting wrong about ACL rehab today? So they're investing all this fancy equipment I see, like Vald, Axit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, what are you
Yeah.
saying?
Um, I think don't get me wrong, like technology is definitely a huge. It's been able to shape my clinical practice really nicely, and having I guess some really firm objective criteria to help guide people along the way. But it certainly won't ever replace like really good decisions that are made from start to finish. And I probably, I mean, you can probably find a lot of different reasons why clinics are not quite winning at ACL rehab, but I think, and that's what we talked about at the recent Learn live events, was that there's just a big 3 month drop off. After 3 months, there's a lot of it's like a nearly 50% fall off the cliff after 3 months. And there's probably a lot of reasons why we saw that. But I think coming back to why there's probably from the outset, there's probably not enough communication to the patient early that this is going to, the ACL injury is, we're here day one post injury. If we're lucky enough to have a preoperative time, this is probably what we're going to go through. Might be an accelerated preoperative plan where, we know already in 4 weeks you're going to have surgery, or hey, do you have any time to play with? Let's drag this out for as long as you like. And then, ACL reconstruction date, we've got now from here through to, around about 9 to 12 months. But there's probably not enough of a discussion on the way that there's these return to the gym goals, there's return to run goals, there's return to training goals, the return to sport goals, and it's such a big length of time where I think even the patient themselves can sometimes get overwhelmed with the length of the journey. And I think it's nice, and that's what we've sort of been really proud about with the Melbourne ACL Rehab Guide, because it breaks down the 9 to 12 month journey, or even 12 months and beyond for some people, into really clear phases. Where the first phase is really spelled out really nicely with let's just get your knee quiet and calm. Takes roughly 4 to 6 weeks. Then let's just build on your gym work for the next 2 to 3 months and get you strong enough to run and jump. And here's your running and jumping program to get you ready for training. And now when you're ready at training and you think you're ready to play sport, these are the sort of tests that we want to make you go through before we play sport. But the guide's always been there to also to be really user-friendly to clinicians all over the world, regardless of whether or not you're really geared with tech or you've just simply got a stopwatch and a measuring tape. And I think that's probably those lack of processes from day one, and really walking people through this would be the expectation of you over the next 12 months, give or take a few months either side. I think it's probably a, a big reason why people really struggle to get beyond the first 3 months. There are other factors like costs. Like I think a lot of people do kind of burn their money out early. The rehab's too forward heavy and front heavy with costs, physical, mental, financial costs that are weighed in heavy, and they kind of burn themselves out. And then they kind of flounder around after 3 months because they've spent all their cash for their 12 months. So I think there's probably needs to have some better frameworks and some better systems put in early. That will probably be a big part of, I think, the reasons why. Yeah, hopefully that answers
No,
some
it
of the
does.
questions.
Yeah, that's the question, because I found your face-to-face workshop really interesting in that note. That
Yeah, yeah,
as soon as the private health insurance runs out, then the value
yep,
automatically just diminishes,
yep.
unfortunately. So the question is, I think you said something, correct me if I'm wrong, about changing the type of sessions you're delivering later on to fit
Yeah,
that
yep,
telehealth, which again, most people don't like doing, or there's some
yeah.
kind of, is that correct? What you said?
Yeah. The telehealth and group classes were just
Yep.
really, really simple ways to kind of soften the financial burden on
Yeah.
the person through through to those late stages. Like you can, from telehealth, you still, arguably you should be charging
Yeah.
the same amount for telehealth consult as what you would have face to face. Your expertise is still highly valued, and you shouldn't cheapen your cost just because you're sitting across a video screen from someone. Your intellect and your programming is in itself a very, very strong thing. But the positive impact it has on the person, because they don't have to cross town. Yeah, if you live in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and you're looking at a 20-minute, half-hour commute, in your lunch break, or after school or after work, that in itself is giving a reprieve, so to speak, from that toll. But then group classes too, like you can you still charge out the hour to meet industry rates, 250, $300 an hour, whatever your kind of going rate is in the clinic. You can just buffer that, divide that by six, or so that the person's still maybe paying $50 for an hour consult effectively, or part of a group
Mm.
session that they're so financially in a better place as well. So yeah, there's definitely ways to drag out that continuity of care. So I think that's a big one, is just to make sure we can get past that 3 month sticking point where people tend to fall off a cliff. And that's where the objective measures, and that's where I find the tech side of things really helpful, because once you get to 3 months and people are starting to flirt with running and jumping, we know, and we've sort of set some nice guidelines in the guide, is that, all right, these are the criteria we want you to hit before we start running and jumping. And then you've got to measure. And if they don't quite meet that target yet in a few key areas, then it's like, okay, well, here's your next program to try and fill those gaps that you're lacking. Come back and, things should change within the next 3 or 4 weeks. If you're really diligent with your rehab, let's test you again and see if you're ready. If you hit that hurdle, great. Now we're looking at training. All right. Our benchmarks have now gone up 10% though. So here's the program that should, lift your capacity and strength values in that next bit of time. So we're constantly assessing and reassessing like a good scientist should, and that's probably what all good physio should operate like. But sometimes it gets lost along the way. But yeah, it's hard. Like if you're an early career clinician who just hasn't seen just the breadth of ACLs over the course of time either, that can sometimes be be something as well. So if you've got, a clinic that employs, 5 or 6 new grads, and they've only got fairly young, mentors as well. And I remember, like, my first year out, my mentors at uni were only 3 years out in my clinic. So, they're babies still. So there aren't always these, 15-year veterans working in every practice as well. So I think if you want to really target and be known as a physio practice that specializes in ACL injuries, you got to probably have that, really great mentor within the practice, but then also to probably have some good systems in play too, so you can, you can see the successes of the patients that you want to appeal to.
Awesome. It's been longer than I expected, but question, based on that, can you turn clinical knowledge at the clinic to intellectual property? I think you're a great person to ask that. Or is it just all about kind of that open source approach, in software?
Yeah,
What's your thoughts on
that's
that?
a good one. I think, I don't know, at my heart, it should be all open knowledge, but I think there's also too, I don't know, like, because unless, I mean, the Melbourne Guide, for example, like, that's, it's Randall and my, intellectual property, more so Randall's, and then I sort of came along and piggybacked off his great initial work. But at the core of what we've developed there is basically picking research that's been published over the years in academia and at university levels, and we've sort of pulled all this information and collated it into one. I don't know. I don't know if you can. I don't know. Something doesn't quite sit well with me necessarily to make that a true your your thing. I think it's still. I don't know if I'm going to be answering this very well.
That's
I
okay.
don't know. I just feel like I feel like there should be some kind of freedom of information,
Right.
particularly in this instance. But also too, obviously, you want to, as a clinic owner, you want to attract and be able to say that you're the best physio clinic in town, and the reasons for XYZ. Maybe there's something within your service that is, truly different, that you can, make as your intellectual property, and might be how you frame up your sessions, how you, I guess, what you provide within your clinic's four walls. I know some clinics who have got really great recovery rooms attached to their clinic, and that's kind of like their, I guess their sales point is that, come in for your rehab, come in for your exercise sessions, and come and hang out with, with the Normatec boots, or, we've got we've got sauna, we've got ultrasound, or we've got cold water immersion, or whatever it may be. That's the kind of thing that becomes like your trademark or your part of your intellectual property there. But I think the research that's kind of backing your decisions, probably it gets a bit murky if you're trying to claim that as your own if you didn't conduct the research. I think that would probably be my position on that one. Hopefully that answers
No,
a
I
bit of
love
your
it. Love
question.
it. No, I know the sticky. You didn't have to have the right answer or wrong answer. No. All right. So finally, how do people reach out to you? So you're running Learn.Physio. You still got the Melbourne ACL rehab guide. What's
Yep.
what, what's your future planned here, Mick? What do you want
Yeah.
to know about you at this point?
Yeah, no, thanks, very. I'm pretty much everywhere. LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. People can add me as a connection. Mick Hughes, I think my handle's physio on LinkedIn. Definitely Instagram, it's at mickhughes.physio. Threads and the Melbourne ACL Rehab Guide, we share that publicly, and everything that we do is certainly, a little bit large chunk of our resources to help people get better is at obviously my real baby, Learn.Physio, www.learn.physio. You'll find the Melbourne ACL Rehab Guide there. We are in the process of turning it into version 3 with some changes that have occurred since our last publication nearly 10 years ago. So we're working with La Trobe University and some of the academics there to help really sort of lift the standard and bring it into 2026 and beyond. And my other baby is like the ACL Hub over on Substack. If anyone's on Substack, I've got a little channel there that I provide a lot of blogs. So away from the video content and back to some of the written form. Yeah, the ACL Hub, you can Google that one. You find me there as well. You can follow me along for free.
Thank you. Thanks, Mick. Thanks for being so generous with your time and insights.
Anytime, Barry. Thanks for the
All
opportunity to have a chat, mate. It's always nice talking with you.
right. Cheers, mate.